Good morning, everyone, and thanks for having me on for Global Azure Auckland. So I'm going to be talking today about minimal IDP or minimal internal development platforms with GitHub and Azure. So first, a bit of an introduction. So who am I? My name is Dylan McCarthy. I'm a principal engineer at Versant, which is a consultancy in Australia. I'm primarily focused on the platform engineering, DevOps, DevX spaces inside the Microsoft domain. I'm a Microsoft MVP for developer tools. And I started off as a .NET developer 10 years ago and have kind of progressed from there into doing .NET, Azure, infrastructure as code, DevOps, all that kind of stuff. And I'm an all-round tech enthusiast with a passion for AI and emerging technologies. So what are we going to talk about today? So first of all, we're going to talk about what internal development platforms are. And then we're going to go around what kind of the benefits are of doing internal development platforms. Then we're going to cover some getting started tips, and then I'll do a live demo of a kind of minimal internal development platform as kind of an idea of a starting point of where you could start off. Cool. So what is an internal development platform? So IDPs are a way that lets your developers have access to your platform, or essentially if you're using cloud and Azure specifically, a way for them to access Azure where they don't need to know so much about how the whole system is working. They don't need to know like what all of the kind of services they need to use. They don't need to know about how to set up networking and infrastructure. We're really abstracting away a lot of that complexity, and so they don't have to really think about it. So it doesn't have to be like everyone thinks, oh, internal development platform, that's like a portal and that's like a page, and then people go to that page and they'll interact with that. But it doesn't have to be a page. So you can do options like command line tools where the developer is able to scaffold the starting project using command line tool. You could even do this as a kind of set of infrastructure as code templates where you give that development team, say, a repository with those templates in it, or even a centralized repository with templates. And you say, okay, well, this is what we're going to use when you deploy your new project. We're going to set these up so that everyone can kind of be consistent in their approach to how we're actually deploying software. So what are the benefits of using internal development platform? As I just said, consistency is key, and that's where you really want to be able to give developers that consistent approach, but also your cloud engineering teams need that consistent approach so they know when a new project's set up, the expectation of what infrastructure will be in place, and this really helps them kind of troubleshoot that. You can use shared templates for ISC or template repos as kind of that setting up structure. But the goal here really is kind of more of a self-service system. So the idea is to reduce the amount of tickets and processes that your platform teams have to deal with when the dev team says, oh, we need a new project and we need to roll it out. So by automating a lot of that and standing up new environments in a consistent way with infrastructure as code and templates, your platform teams don't have to worry about, oh, a development team has gone ahead and chosen some different style of doing things and they're trying to really do things ad hoc. Whereas if they're templated, we know that it's consistent, it meets all the requirements that the platform team has, and we're also making sure it's secure as default by tying in any kind of security practices or security tooling from the very beginning, not as an afterthought. The other advantage here is that it also lets your developers focus more on what they do best, which is writing code. We don't want the developers having to sit there and figure out, okay, what infrastructure as code do I need? How is the networking going to work? How am I going to get the different services I need inside Azure to actually talk to each other? It abstracts away a lot of that kind of work, and that really takes the cognitive load off your development teams and allows them more freedom to just work on the code and the application, which is going to bring value to the customer or to the company they're working for. So, how do we get started with this? How do we get started with actually building out a platform? Well, internal development platform. What we need to do is first of all look at the current environment. So we need to look at bottlenecks and friction points, and really find what is causing us slowdown or what is causing inconsistency, and what things we can start to really automate to help with that. And then from there, the advice is really just start simple. Find a simple thing to do as your first iteration. This might be something like even setting up a form where the development team fills out a form in a standard way to give information to the platform team. So it doesn't always need to be a big tooling project. You can just be working on processes and the different ways of working and standardizing that so that your teams are more efficient when they talk to each other. But from there, you can start to look at tools. But really, you want to make sure you have a good grasp of what the issues are. And then when you start to choose the tools that kind of solve the problems you're after rather than trying to say, let's use Backstage as an example and deploying it. And then you've got massive amounts of features, but you may only use one or two. And now you have a massively complex system to maintain where you're not really using a good degree of it. And you're now dealing with a lot of complexity within support. And this also brings us to the idea of building your own tools. I generally recommend if you can build your own tools, and the reason for this is because it can be more flexible and more kind of scope to what you're doing. And these tools don't have to be really complicated, especially as I show you when we get into demo. The tool that I've built for today is not super complicated. Um, and it can be a CLI tool or it can be a portal. And again, the goal here is to start small and grow as needed, not try to effectively boil the ocean and solve every problem at once, but find the problems that are causing you the most friction and try and work on them. And then we want to make sure you're talking to your developers. Essentially, they're the ones who'll be using this platform, whether it's CLI or portal. Um, and we should be treating them as customers. And what that also then entails is actually treating our platform as if it was a product. And kind of looking at the idea of, okay, well, if it's a product, then we need to build it up a bit. We need to maybe do a release. We need to get some early testers, which will be your development team. And treating those developers as clients allows them to also feel as if you're giving them something that's helping them, that's kind of serving them. And that can then help with the adoption of it as well, which can be a challenge with some teams where it's difficult to get them to adopt a new process. But if you're presenting them with this kind of platform as a product, they're going to feel much more empowered to go along with you than as if you just turn around and said, well, here's a tool, you have to use it. So, very brief overview of what the internal development platforms are. But rather than just talk at you the whole time, I think it's much better to show you what I mean and show you a light demo. So what I'll do is I'll just switch over to some code. So now if everyone so I think this is going to be big enough, but if it's any issues, if you could let us know in chat, if this text is too small or anything like that. Hopefully this is all good. So what we have here in this application, we have a front end and a back end application. So we have our front end, which is written with TypeScript and SvelteKit, and our back end, which is written in .NET.
Hey, Dylan, I think
Yeah.
you're sharing like only the PowerPoints, not the code
Ah,
itself.
okay. Thank you. Let me bounce that share. Okay. Okay, let's try try share the entire screen. That might help a bit better. Has that come up now?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so I was saying we've got our front-end application, and then we have our API here, which is .NET. And the reason that I have it split is because if I did want to create a CLI tool, I could still use this same backend API to communicate with the API tool. So if we go have a look at this .NET application here. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into the code. Obviously, there's a lot of code here, but just from a very top level, all we're really doing here is we've got some endpoints. So let's scroll down to where we can just do a registration, and it just goes ahead and it's going to communicate with Azure Entra ID, which is still called Azure ID in here. And it's going to do an app registration. So this is going to register the application as an entity within Entra. And we're also able to store apps. And we also have a bit of a portal here. So we can look at what applications are going to be in the system, which then also gives us a bit of a management page. So essentially, all we're doing here is we're controlling the different aspects of the registration of the application in Entra. We're also going to do some stuff with GitHub too. So we have a GitHub service here as well. And that will allow us to set up a repository. So what I'll do now is I'll actually start this off running and we'll be able to see what this all looks like as an actual platform. So let me run this. Okay, and then we'll pop this up. Okay, so hopefully that's all popped up. So what we have here, oops, and I need to start my storage. Okay, so let me just refresh that. No, sorry, it decides it doesn't want to start my storage. So I'm just using table storage here, but I'm just using the Azure plugin to set that up. And it's so it doesn't want to work for a sec. Okay. That's right. It's first demo of the day for me, so that's definitely why it's decided it's going to misbehave a little bit. So let me just restart that one for a second. Just thinking about it. Apologies for that. Let me just restart my Visual Studio Code instance and see if that is the issue. Okay. For some reason my service isn't coming up. Just going to, there we are. That's what I want, table service. Alrighty. So let's get this moving again. So we'll get back into the platform about that, and then we will run that application, and then we'll get back into our front. And then we will run this one. Okay, so let's try that again. There we go. That's much better. Okay, so we have our kind of very simple platform here. So we're able to see we've got a couple applications here, which we've previously done. And so now if we go and create a new application, we can see we've got a few options here. So first of all, we're going to give the application a name, and we'll just call this Global Azure. And we can select our stack. So what we're doing here when we say selecting stack, we're actually just selecting what template we might want to use. So we have a templated repository, which we use as the base. So you can set up in that template repository some basic infrastructure as code, maybe a Docker file, something like that. So if you have different stacks, you can then have different templates which have those different base setups. So what we'll do here is we'll set create repository. And then this has gone and created a repository. So we'll go and open this and have a look at what's in this template repository. So I'll just pull that over here. Cool. So you can see here on GitHub. So we've got our new repository. We can see which template it was generated from. And we can see in here we've got some bicep files. So one bicep file, which just gives an example of some infrastructure. Again, this would be specific to how you'd want to set up that infrastructure. And we also have preloaded some pipelines for some initial automation. So this is kind of an app deployment pipeline. We have a build and publish pipeline. And then we have our infrastructure deployment pipeline. And in here, you can see we're using these secrets. So we've got Azure Client ID, Tenant ID, and a subscription ID. And what this is allowing us to do is use OAuth OIDC to actually connect in with GitHub and with Azure and do a federated credential. But to do that, we need to register the application. So if we come back here, we can see we have a register application button. We hit this. And what this has done is it's gone ahead into Azure and actually registered this application. So I'll just jump over to Azure now. So if we come into here, into Azure, into our Entra ID, what we can do is we go down to our app registrations. And let's go to that all applications here. And we can see here we have Global Azure Auckland. So this has been registered. And then if we come into our certificates and secrets, we can see here we have a federated credential which has been created. So this is what's going to connect into GitHub and allow us to use OIDC to now push applications or push those pipelines into the environment. So if I just bounce back to the application, so I can now, to make this all connect and work, we need to push the secrets which we created, that federated credential, and we're going to push that over into our repository. So if I hit this button here, and we can see now that the repository secrets have been added. So if we pop back to our repository here, and we go to our settings within the repository, and we can come down to secrets and variables here and actions, and we can see that this has been populated now with those client ID, subscription ID, and tenant ID, and that then all connected up to allow us to now use those pipelines, and anything from the main branch will then be able to deploy into Azure. So that's really the crux of it. And the goal here, again, isn't to solve all problems. We're really just kind of looking at what is the minimal we can do. And in this case, the minimal we can do really is we just have this one very simple portal, which allows us to then register our applications, create our Git repositories, and then add our secrets so that we can start that automation pipeline really in a seamless way. And then what you'd mostly do with an application like this as a starting point. You may not have all those individual buttons; they're really for demonstration purposes. But you might automate that whole process where it's register an application, all those steps happen. Maybe you want to add like an approval step in or something like that. And then that lets you start off the project in a way where we have this base repo, and then that gets you started to the point where developer just can come in, they can clone this down, put their code in, push that code back up, and get to start work. They don't have to sit there waiting for tickets or for the whole system to kind of go back and forth on things. They're just able to get started, and then you can work with teams if we need to build out, say, the infrastructure as code a bit more, or maybe if the pipelines need a little bit more work, but at least you're starting from a point rather than really starting from nothing. So let's just do a bit of a recap as to what we've really covered in this session. So we've really spoken about the minimal internal development platform as a great way to start on your platform engineering journey. So if we're moving from, say, that more traditional DevOps that we've been seeing lately, where you have that DevOps team and they're really tasked with setting a lot of this stuff up, we're now moving towards a platform engineering way of doing things where we're providing the platform to our users, in this case, the developers, to allow them to then go ahead and really get the most out of their application and the whole automation process. We start small and iterate fast. So as you saw with that demo, it's very simple. There's a lot more things you could do. And there's definitely some caveats around using that platform. For example, it's using templated repos, which are a great way to start. But as you kind of progress, what will happen is that maybe the core infrastructure as code changes in the template repo, and that won't automatically update in all of the repositories which have used that template to start with. So you'd have to go and update all of those. So maybe what you'd do in that case is have a central repository for your infrastructure as code, which is then referenced in, say, GitHub Actions or reusable workflows or something like that, so that you can control where that is done in a central location so you don't have to change it in every location. But that's just an example of the next steps you could take from this minimal system. And as I said, it doesn't need to be a portal. You could just have the template repo. You could have a template repo with the IAC templates in it and just essentially say, okay, if you're starting a new repository, go to GitHub, create a new repo with the template, and still then do everything else manually. It's choosing the starting point which makes the most sense for you and your organization, and essentially getting the foot in the door to then progress further as things make sense. And then really it's important to talk to your development teams and keep them in the loop in the process. You really want to be doing that kind of cross collaboration between your platform teams and your development teams so that they are brought along with the journey, and also they have input, because they might not want to use a portal. They might want to use the CLI, or they might have some opinionated ways that they want to set up, say, Docker files. And rather than you setting up a basic Docker file, maybe you can do something a bit more to that team, like with the stacks, and have that .NET stack, have that Java stack, and really give them the option of which one they use, giving them more flexibility. So that's been my presentation for today. Did leave some time here for any kind of questions. Feel free to connect with me over LinkedIn, Blue Sky, GitHub. So that repository with the minimal IDP is available on my GitHub. So feel free to go look at that one, see if it suits your need. It's fully open source, so you can grab it, use it as a base, and manipulate it as you need.
Well, thanks so much, Dylan. Yeah, I was gonna ask you about like the source codes you just shared. I'm definitely exploring that. This week I've been playing like with those federated credentials.
Yeah.
That comes handy. Yeah, I'm definitely exploring what you're sharing. And well, I like your approach. Bring like these templates, like for like the teams, work like with the development team, and establishing like those foundations, right? So or standards for teams to build up like on top of that. Yeah. So from your experience, like so what you have creating there, like just these simple templates, are you guys like leveraging that currently, or how's it working for you?
Yeah. So one of the is very much the example that we're leveraging in this case Bicep, um, but we're really setting them up in a very basic way, and they're more like a guidance. They're not so much, oh, okay, well you're going to deploy this straight away. It's more of okay, well here's examples. And again, that's kind of ties towards that minimal aspect of it, where at this stage we're not prescribing it's like you must use this, but we're saying, okay, we've set you up with a repository and we've given you an example of what the infrastructure is code, and now we can work on it. But definitely as you mature more, then yeah, you might use like more of a landing zone type thing where every application will have a basic core of networking. Maybe everything is expected to be using Azure Container Apps or something like that. So you can really then start to get a bit more prescriptive with it. Um, but it's very much dependent on the teams, and I think that's the biggest kind of point with the internal development platforms is it really depends on your teams and how your teams want to interact with it.